disputation where he really goes into this. It's like Disputations 5 and 6, which I've not found in English. But the article on Suarez here on the, oh my goodness, what is this? The internet? No. Whatever the Plato.Stanford one is. Stanford Encyclopedia. Yeah, goodness, brain for it. Anyway, I think the guy I think Chris Shields wrote this one. But anyway, so he kind of goes through these couple of paragraphs about where he kind of tries to distinguish Suarez's nominalism, the consideration of universals, because he does talk about, these things, right? That those things which are denominated as universals, they truly exist, right? They truly exist in things, or in reality, right? As it's put here. Okay, but he's obviously very much a nominalist. So how do you reconcile these two things? And at the end of the day, there's one thing I want to talk about this, and then I want to talk more about the act potency distinction. But where was it? So this concept of a formal unity, right, which he talks more about here. Okay. In all real things, there is a formal unity per se belonging to each essence or nature. And again, Disputation 6 is on formal unity, and I don't have that. So every individual is not only one in number, but one in essence. Right? And that this is distinguished by reason. Right? So there's no as it says, so there's no world-given distinction between something's existing as this or that kind of individual, that this is an act of reason, right? Which again, I see the nominalism, but I still don't get, how do you avoid, even if you're predicating something, right? The predication between, what does he say here? I think he gives, it's like between Paula and Peter or whatever. Yeah, there it is. Between Peter and Paula, this common predication is rightly made. So it derives from the fact that, according to Suarez, there is an objective similarity between them. And it's a similarity that is not imposed by the mind. Like Suarez doesn't appear to be like a pure nominalist, right? This isn't something the mind imposes on reality, but that the mind apprehends this common predicate. It's just not a real thing between them. And I can't understand that.
Right? Couldn't you just ask further, is the similarity real?
Yeah, I guess that's that question, right? So
what does the similarity consist?
Yeah. So yeah. Directly. So it follows from these considerations that although some individuals may be on the part of the thing or on the part of the individual, right, they're formally one apart from the thinking of the mind. Nevertheless, several individuals which are said to be of the same nature are not one thing with the true unity which is in the things, but only either by way of being grounded or through the intellect. It follows, secondly, that it is one thing to speak of formal unity and another to speak of the community or the commonality of this unity. For unity in things, as has been, the unity is in things, and Suarez says earlier that it's something incommunicable. Community, properly and strictly, is not in things. For no unity which exists in things is common. Which similarity is not properly a unity, as it does not represent the undividedness of the entities on which it's based, but only their congruence or their relation or their coexistence with one another. Right? So he wants the universal is a real thing for Suarez, but it's a real thing that results from the act of the mind in apprehending an objective similarity between two individuals. But then I don't all right. Because I get on the one hand, right? I think we're agreed that universals do not subsist, right? We're pretty clear on that, right? The only things that exist outside the mind are individuals, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what Suarez is really kind of hinging on. And so what I think he's calling a universal that really exists in reality, or that truly exists in reality, is produced by the mind's apprehension of similarity between these individuals. I think without having the disputation in front of me, I want to ask first, is that kind of what he's saying? And then I'd like to figure out what's wrong with that. Because we do talk about I want to ask later what the universal in fact is, but that's actually connected to the essence existence thing. I don't want to go there yet. But we would say, right, like, so first we would say that we abstract that so between Peter and Paula, right, they actually do share something in common that the mind abstracts from them, right? So the universal is an ens rationis. It is a being of reason. It's something that exists in the mind, but it's something about Peter and Paula that my mind has abstracted from their individuality. Yes?
Yeah. So, I mean, if it's in the mind by abstraction, then it's in something else to be abstracted, right?
Yes.
So that's what you have to admit, right? If you're talking about,
that's what I don't understand. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
So you have a nature in a thing, right? And that nature, as such, is universal, and it's in the thing individually, right?
Yeah, it's been individuated by that thing's matter. Yeah, it's
right.
in that thing individually. Gotcha.
Right, and it's well, you can even say it for things that are not material too, right? Angels have natures that are individual too.
Yeah,
but their what?
Well, I don't know if their case is a little bit different, just because each individual also exhausts all of its species.
Yeah,
like there's a genus. I don't even know if you can say that there's a genus. I don't think you can. That there's a genus angel, and there are these differentiations of species.
No, not strictly speaking. No.
Yeah. So I don't know that you could say there's nothing universal, is there, that we grasp from all of the angels individually?
Not univocally, no. What all I'm saying is that
I just think it's more problematic than thinking of natural things, but I don't want to derail the thing. Continue your point.
Okay, so coming into the mind, you have something universal, right? And that thing that's universal came from something outside the mind, right?
Yeah.
The mind is it's like the agent intellect is kind of like peeling layers, right? Taking away everything that's not generic about the thing, right? That's not essential about the thing, and then leaving you only with that nature, right? That essence, right?
Yep.
And that's what comes into the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you think about the things, right, in a generic way, right? So if you're considering the nature, right, there's something that comes out of the mind too, right? Like the mind, something has come into the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have a thought, when you think about something, right, there's a procession in your mind, right? There's a procession going out, right?
You mean in denominating or in something else?
Just in thinking, right? Whenever you consider, just have the first act of the mind.
Okay, I got you.
Right?
Those acts of the mind. Got you.
Right, the first act of the mind. There's something going out, which depends on what's come in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that thing that goes out is universal too, right? It's a universal nature, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's the same one that's come in, right?
I was gonna say it would have to be if it's based on that active apprehension.
But if you have a thought, if you're having a thought about the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the thought, if it's a thought, then there has to be a procession in the mind. And if there's a procession, then you have the mind as one term of the procession, and whatever the thought is as the other term of the procession, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have mind and thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thought, if it's from the thing that you're thinking about, which was abstracted universally, then that thought, that term of the procession, is also universal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we give it a different name, right? when it comes in on its way in, we call it an intelligible species, right? And then on its way out, we give it a different name. The term of the procession of thought, we call it a concept, right? So
Yeah.
that's all I'm saying. I mean,
Okay. I'm with you.
I get the part from Suarez where he talks about the mind producing something, like that you have a universal from the mind.
Mhm.
That's the only thing that I can think of that would in any way kind of relate to what's being said there.
Mhm.
Not that I agree with his word, but yeah, your mind is the source of something universal. But it's only a source in a derived way, right? So it takes something universal, and then it produces something universal too,
Mhm.
right?
Is that saying
So
something different than? See,
yeah, because
the centrality seems to be this concept of formal unity, which I really don't. Again, I don't have that disputation in front of me, so I don't really know what he means by things. It was kind of talking about
formal
something up
unity.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, what I don't really know what he specifically means by it, but what I understand, what comes to mind um, in this text is that if you have a nature, um,
This.
and you have parts of a nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then those parts have to be together to constitute a whole nature, right? Take rationality and will and body and passion and what all that's like. All those stuff those are distinct things. Have to
Yeah.
be a part of the same nature. They have to constitute one thing, right? And the way that's united is through a formal unity, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a unity. It's a kind of thing that what makes reason and body part of the same nature is formal unity.
Yeah, I think that vaguely seems to. That sounds. I mean, first of all, that sounds right to me. That doesn't sound entirely different from what Suarez is saying here. About the thing's formal unity is to be one essentially. Right? Formal unity distinguished from singularity by reason, and individual unity does not belong to some common essence by itself. Something must be added, namely formal unity. That is to say, nothing is a human being, say, merely in virtue of its being one. That one must have, in addition, some definite formal character, namely being human, or whatever, being this. The claim that something is a unity tells us nothing determinate about the individual beyond that it's just one. By contrast, formal unity takes us directly to an essence without any addition, even by reason.
Okay.
So kind of what was given us so much trouble during comps was like, so when you get to the question, when Suarez does talk about essence and existence and why he wants to say in finite things, they're the same. I mean, he has a point, at least on this respect, I think, right? So Jake, for you, Jake, being you can't be without being Jake, right? For you, being and being Jake are the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why he wants to say that then in finite things, your essence and your existence are the same, because you can't be without the being you. Being and being Jake are the same thing in you.
Okay.
But I know, on the other hand, that essence and existence have to be distinct in finite creatures. So,
well, I mean, okay, so that's Aristotle kind of makes an argument like that, but he's not making the same conclusion, right?
mm-hmm.
He says, for living things, to be or to live is to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But to be is one kind of perfection, and to live is a different kind of perfection. It's a different formal perfection, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just because they coincide for living things, right, that doesn't mean that the formal perfection of being is the same as the formal perfection of living.
Yeah, that's true, but I think so. Like you can this
Those are,
takes us out of the individual, but like something can be without being alive, right? Like a rock exists, and a rock is not alive, but for a living thing,
right.
even though those are rationally distinct. And this is maybe, I think this is what Suarez might say, is that those are rationally distinct perfections, but in the thing, it can't be alive without being, and a living thing can't be without being alive. And those perfections are the same in the thing, and they're rationally distinct, I think is what he's saying.
Okay, so Suarez
Rather
is
than
saying,
being,
yeah.
I think I'm
Go.
No. I was going to say, I think that's what he's saying. But rather than being truly distinct in the thing, they're the
The
same
essence
in
and
the
the
thing.
existence.
Yeah. I think for definitely he says that in this Disputation 3031. Yeah, they're not distinct in the thing; they're rationally distinct in our mind when we understand something. Right. So when I look at a living thing, I distinguish, as you just did, between those perfections of being and being alive. But in a tree, those two things are the same for it because it cannot do the one without the other.
Okay. Well, what do you say to the objection then that if being and living for a thing is the same reality, and well, it's okay. So I guess I'm having trouble threading the needle here because I think some of it is right.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the soul is like,
this was a mind bender for comps. Joe and I stayed up, I think, like all night, a couple of nights, like trying to work through this because it's and Suarez is a good thinker. I have to hand him that. He might not be right, but he's definitely detailed.
So I mean, like the soul is the same reality responsible for both, right? Okay. It's responsible for the being of the thing and the living of the thing, right? I feel like I'm misunderstanding what Suarez is saying,
because and I'm probably doing a poor job of presenting it too. I'm not.
My counter argument just seems a little too simple. But what I'm thinking is, if he thinks that they're reducible to the same reality, the essence and the existence, then why are things able to be destroyed while their natures can still? Well, it's
well, but I think it's the what he does say. What I do remember in 31 about that, not that it's not the to say that essence and existence are the same in the thing isn't to say that the thing's essence is to be. That would be like, well, then that would be open to the argument that what about them being destroyed. It's that when the thing ceases to be, its essence ceases to be. That's his kind of thing. So like Jake, you so to be and to be Jake, for you, they're the same thing.
Okay. Yeah.
When you stop, Jake, there's when you stop existing, there's also no more Jakeness. Not your Jakeness. It's done.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fine.
But I think that's his. But then so your essence and existence, they come into being, they go out of being. It's kind of like mutually dependent on each other. I don't know if I can phrase it that way. If that's an accurate presentation of his thought, but
I guess just what I'm thinking is that every generic perfection and every specific perfection is simultaneous with one another, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, when the man stops living, the animal stops living too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when the animal stops living, the body the living body stops living, being
Yeah.
a living body too, right?
Yeah.
Like you can just keep going and going, right?
But I think, but everything that it is, its essence ceases when its existence ceases. That's Suarez's point.
Yeah,
I
the
think
essence
that's
of that thing.
Yes. Then that's why I
Yeah,
said,
I'm okay with that.
yeah, but I think that's what he's saying, though.
Okay.
I don't know. I might have to go.
So
Like
Suarez
I
got
said,
something right.
no, because I want to think that this is wrong. Like in everything that is not God, its essence and existence has to be not just rationally distinct, but really distinct, right?
Well, I mean, yeah,
Distinct in the way that potency and act are distinct. Maybe.
So I guess this is true. Can I want to maybe then, all right, if I can move into the essence, I wanted maybe essence and existence distinction real quick, and then the act potency distinction, what I was thinking about that. Because this is kind of Suarez. I'm going to simplify it, but this was, Pete, did you read this for your comps? Did you do Suarez? All right. You should chime in a little bit here. I know you've been strangely silent. I'm sure you have a grasp of this probably much better than I do.
Pete's just waiting to silently
I know.
kill.
Yeah. He's gonna like sneak out of the shadows, slit my throat, and then retreat back into the silence of
You're just waiting for us to say
he's waiting for that moment to strike and be like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard."
It's like, well, if you guys think that, then let me just demonstrate to you why you have the IQ of a cold day in Russia. So, like, well, damn it, why did I?
hang my head, sulk out of the room, So to oversimplify, I think this was how Joe and I would talk about it to each other. So like in the question on finite things, their essence and existence. So Suarez does raise that question. All right, so he's like, all right, Thomists, if your essence and existence are really distinct, then he's like, what is your
essence
prior to coming into exist? Like where is it? What is it? Like it can't be anything, because if it doesn't exist, it's nothing.
Right. And, well, yeah, but that's part of his thing with potency being simply non-being.
Does he hold that potency is non-being?
He distinguishes between objective and subjective potency, and says that, well, objective potency is simply nothing, because you're simply saying there is an active power that can bring something about, and there's no subject for the potency. It's simply in the intention or the mind of the agent. So God can create out of nothing. So all these things are in objective potency. That doesn't mean they have any being whatsoever outside of God. They're just, he could create them. That's just a sort of logical thing. But then subjective potency, for a thing to have that, it needs to already actually exist. So essence is either objective potency, in which case it doesn't exist at all, or it's subjective potency, which means the thing already exists that has that essence, or the essence has its own existence, and it's just sitting there waiting to receive existential existence, which doesn't make any sense. So therefore essence is not anything different than existence itself, because it's just nothing apart from it.
Yeah, that sounds right. Or at least, that sounds like Suarez.
That's how I remember his argument going.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar.
But it seems to me though that you can say, well, I grant that essence doesn't exist apart from existence, but when they're together, I can still see one of them being potential to the other.
Yeah. Couldn't you make the same argument about matter and form?
Well, what does he say about matter and form?
See, I didn't read Suarez for comps, because my year of comps was the last one before it got revamped.
Yep.
I slid under, and I was I'm gonna do Deconic and just the first part of Deconic. Deconic.
Oh. I used the old list.
Dr. Fincher's like, wait, yeah, okay. and then when I get into my comms defense, he's like, so you read the whole thing, right? It's like, no, we talked about just doing the first part. He's like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna redo this question then. It's like, yeah, you redo that question.
Yeah, you do that. You redo the question.
Yeah. It was anyway. So I'm kind of approaching Suarez blind, except for the Suarez that I read in Osborne's Essence and Existence class.
You probably read Disputation 31.
Part of it.
Or part of it.
Yeah, probably. I do remember the distinction between the objective and the subjective potency. And I think I actually have Suarez here somewhere.
I'm starting to collect him.
But at least you can just without remembering what he's saying before, you can make the same claim about matter and form, right? It's like, well, you don't see matter on its own. Matter on its own is nothing, and same with form. Form on its own is nothing, right? Not a thing. So they're really just the same thing. Then you could just say that.
Yeah. I do remember, and Osborne in the tutorial about this, I remember this was Osborne's point, was that it's because Suarez messes up what act and potency means. He messes up all the matter, form, essence, existence, all the other expressions of that distinction, because he doesn't get potency.
Right.
He kind of, like Pete says, like either potency is either nothing, or it's already something that's in act, right? And
if you don't see
wherever it is,
if you don't see that there's
Pete's going to get Suarez. I have him. He's back. I see it on the shelf there.
What color is that? Is that an orange book?
It's blue. Mine's
blue.
Hang on.
Anyway, because I seem to remember he said something that was kind of offensive about matter and form, like God could just create matter.
Oh, okay. So that's
just
a
sitting
hardcover.
there without form.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Pete. What'd you say?
I was going to say, I seem to remember Suarez saying something like, oh, God could just create matter if he wanted and just have it sitting there and with no form. So it has being.
Yeah, this is the Norman Wells translation.
Right. Yeah, that's fine as well.
Yeah, I have that book, Pete. That one.
See the paper. Yeah, this was a hardback I got from some Iowa State University library.
I'm pretty sure that is just this, but someone just slapped.
See, they were selling it. So
that's not like a publisher's hardcover. That's a aftermarket, souped up.
But this doesn't have the Latin in it like my nice CUA press one.
It would be nice to have the Latin. I mean, to the extent that reading Suarez is nice.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't say stupid shit like the philosopher and she.
She, a philosopher.
Unheard of.
Ridiculous.
Right, if you can find it, Pete, I've got it in front of me. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll raise my question about potency after we kind of talked about this. Because it seems like he's just like, you're prior to coming into being. What is Jakeness? Where is it? What is it? Like it either exists, but it can't be if your essence stands in potency to existence. It's like, or it's just nothing. But then you have the something doesn't come from nothing problem.
Yeah. So I mean, there's just the denial, right, of potency being a kind of middle between being and non-being, right?
Doesn't Thomas or Aristotle, somebody, it's kind of a middle, but it's a division of being. It's clearly potency is not nothing.
Right.
That's something
Potency is
we're-
not pure nothingness. Right? And if you, because to purely be nothing is not equivalent to not being real, right?
What?
So
Purely
potency,
being nothing.
to be pure nothing,
That
is different than to not be real
okay.
or actual.
Okay. I was gonna say, I don't know, there are a couple of things by real. Maybe.
I was just thinking of so on the bottom of 148, he's talking about matter, and he says, it is denied that matter, properly speaking, receives existence by means of form. But just as it is immediately created, so it immediately receives existence, although dependently on form. Isn't that weird?
Yep.
So, in that way in which it is supposed, it is supposed as existent, because it is supposed as created, and outside its efficient cause, and this is to exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it exists. It doesn't get existence from form, but it can't exist without form.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, this seems to, what's her face in the colloquium. I sat in on one of the colloquium for the potential job aspects last week. Dr. Fisher was talking about how some of the late, before Suarez, after Thomas, like the Occam and the other dude? Oh my goodness. Who's the other Franciscan that messes up everything? Scotus.
Scotus
Oh.
Francisco?
Yeah. But that both of them kind of say that, potency or pure prime matter has to have some sort of act in its own right. Like it has to be, whereas Thomas and Aristotle talk about prime matter as being pure potency, they're like, no, prime matter has to have some sort of act on its own. For some of but the Suarez kind of echoes that idea here, right? That matter does not get its existence from form, but it can't exist without form. It just kind of has some existence in its own right.
And he says sort of parallel about forms.
Mm-hmm.
That an accidental form has its own proper existential being, which it imparts to a subject when it informs it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it would be nothing at all, and so we wouldn't even be talking about it.
Yeah, that's the kind of like reductio that he keeps coming back to repeatedly in this question. He's like, if it's really separate from existence, then it's like, well, then what is it? What is it? What would it be? Why are we we wouldn't even be talking about it because it's nothing.
Right.
So Pete, can you? I'm not sure if I'm getting it, and I'm too lazy to get it. But is Suarez?
I could use a refill if you want to go grab it.
No.
It's not that worth getting.
No. So Suarez is Suarez's argument that matter is a subject of creation, or can be a subject of creation, and insofar as it's a subject of creation, it must therefore be the subject of its own active existence apart from form.
Well, yeah, although he adds the word immediately, at least here, says, just as matter is immediately created, so it immediately receives existence, although dependently on form. So I'm not sure what that adds, but yeah, it seems to me basically God creates matter, and that means he makes matter to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that means matter's existence comes from God, not from form. Something like that. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah. I see.
Even in terms of creation, though, right? Isn't kind of what Suarez is drawing on the fact that, like, when God creates from nothing and there is nothing, he doesn't make prime matter and then stuff. God makes the stuff, right?
Yeah, he makes things.
That supposes prime matter. So it's like God creates prime matter, but it's in the context of like actually making things.
Yeah, like
Right.
he doesn't create color
Yeah.
Right.
and then pour it into stuff.
Yeah.
Like he creates prime matter kind of like in the context of making designated matter.
Or making things with
Yeah, just things. He makes things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm thinking of it more on the material side, but yeah. He makes things. And I wonder, like, I kind of think that's what Suarez is maybe, I don't know if that's what he's thinking or if that's what he's relying on.
I feel like he would do better if he thought that.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So maybe this is the shortest question that as I was thinking through all of this stuff. So when we talk about universals, and I think Thomas says this in the question on ideas. What is it, like question 15 or something like that? It's early on in the Prima, right? When we talk about universals, then, like what we talk about as universals, because they don't actually subsist, no universal exists. Do we mean
On its own?
Yeah, on its right. Yeah, there's no like man, right? There are men that exist, right? Man does not exist, right? Except as an idea in the divine mind. Yes, isn't that what we? And then that common nature is as it exists in our minds and as shared, but that's because it comes from the divine mind, right?
Well,
God makes things with this idea. Individual things with this idea that he has, like a carpenter makes chairs out of this idea. God makes men or everything.
Well, could you say something like, just like, number in one sense doesn't exist until I count some things, so too man as a common or universal nature doesn't exist until I consider many men sharing in one universal nature.
Really? If there were a bunch of if God had only created a bunch of Douglas fir trees and there were nobody to consider all of the individual fir trees, wouldn't there still be Douglas fir treeness?
I'm thinking of Aristotle's distinction of the numbering number and the numbered number.
Yeah, I get that. I don't know, but I don't know if that's the same thing.
Well, I was trying to make the comparison and say that the basis for the universality exists even apart from considering that actual act of abstraction or universal consideration. Just like the numerable things exist without the numeration.
Yeah, but that's, I think the numerable things, they don't share something in common like number until it's understood by a mind. But I think like men share something in common, whether that's understood by anyone or not.
So
the commonality comes from, it's the mind that perceives the commonality. I guess, like, what do you mean by?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, if you removed humanity, right? If there were only nothing, again, let's just take Christmas trees or rocks. I don't really care, right? If God had only made those things, there would still be, like, rock is a universal, right? There would still be some nature that every created rock shares, but it's the idea that's in the divine mind.
So I think that's the distinction that you just made at the end is the operative one. So it's you wouldn't use the term universal because that signifies a grouping together.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But if you just talk about nature, or form, or that exists, that exists whether there's a perceiver or not. It's true that those natures are universal.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I'm asking about.
But to use the term universal, you're loading in as part of that notion the kind of grouping together activity that a mind that requires a mind.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's where the confusion's coming from.
I was going to say, I think so. That almost sounds like a little bit of when, Suarez is trying to talk about, because I think Suarez does this. He's like, the universal is the product of the mind grasping this commonality. But the commonality, I think even Suarez wants to reduce back to the divine mind. Like I think that's what he wants to say. Like, so prior to Jake existing, Jakeness exists only in the divine mind. Prior to your coming into being.
But
Well, that last part, that's fine.
yeah, but I mean, for Suarez, there is also no humanity, but we would say there's other human beings before Jake comes into existence.
Well, I think Suarez would say, yeah, there's being human, and that's what's objectively predicated among all of these human beings. But yeah, I think he would, the problem comes into his, I think, wanting to say that isn't actually anything that we share in common. And we would want to say that that's most definitely a nature that we share in common. But that nature is reducible back to the divine mind, right?
Yes, I think I don't think that's objectionable.
Yeah, I want to say
whatever I have,
yeah,
is the same thing that you have, believe it or not.
Yes.
And those same things are reducible to the idea of that thing in God's own mind.
Yeah, that I think is right.
He's taking the thing from his mind, and it is a template. I think that's even the language that St. Thomas uses in question 15. But it's an artist as an artist to
that's
his
exactly
template, and he's just applying this distinctly individually in different members of created things. Right? So I have reason, you have reason. It's the same reality. It's the same kind of reality in me and you, and it comes from this thing in himself that he's applying distinctly to different members of the same kind. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think that's because in reading this and trying to think, I'm also trying to resolve because I think that's what I've thought is that questions like the universals or like, well, what are universals? I think at the end of the day, whatever you have to say that they're reducible to the template in the divine mind. Like that's the universal, and I've grasped it, I've abstracted it from by the divine art. It's being put into all of these individual things.
Well, I mean, are you using the term universal because you're already loading divine mind into the picture?
Maybe I'm working towards it backwards. That what I have grasped, what I've abstracted from all of these individuals as something truly common, a nature that all of them share, what this nature is, it's not a product of my mind.
Yeah,
it's something that
you're not causing this.
I've not caused it. It's something that I've understood from all of these particulars. But since the only thing that exists are particulars, this commonality that I'm apprehending has been put into them by the divine artist.
Yeah. So the only thing that I want to
commonality, I guess, ultimately then resides in the divine mind. I think I'm going up that way.
Okay, so yeah, I think I just want to add the caveat, and I think I see where Suarez deviates from St. Thomas's mode of thinking. You see things, right? And when you see things, you don't cause the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Suarez is making a claim that the things that you see, you cause, right?
No, he doesn't.
He's not making that claim, right?
No.
Where I think so, this is a point of departure right here. You see things, you don't cause the things, but the things that you see are common,
mm-hmm.
and the commonality, that's something that you do cause. I think that's the point of departure. It's like, okay, there's a thing there and a thing there, and you see them to be common, and therefore you're kind of causing the commonality to exist.
Yeah, I
And
don't know if
that's
exactly
and
what Suarez is claiming or not, but
well, it seems to kind of come out in the language. I'm not exactly sure. Like I said, I'm not.
yeah,
You're more recent with Suarez than I am, but I think he's saying that you cause the commonality, the very commonality of the things that you see that you don't cause. You do cause that commonality. Like the universality of the thing comes from you, because you're making them to be. You see them to be common, and therefore you make them to be common.
yeah,
And that's where I can't be on board. I'm like, the commonality is there to be seen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not something that you bring about. Right.
Right.
It is
That
brought
might,
about by you. Right?
Yeah, but you're
Because
not caused.
it takes
You're
a
like,
mind, but you don't make that to be common. Right. You
Yeah.
just see that they're common.
And
that's
that,
the difference.
you're right. That might be so, as he says, right. So, yeah, universals in reality are not separate from singulars. These things are natures that we denominate universals who are not really separated from singular things, since everything which exists is singular and individual. That's fine. So this is back to the author. His position then is that only individuals exist, but that a collection of individual human things can be regarded as having a common nature. Right? But this is just to say that a universal predicate is a human is applied equally and rightly to Peter and Paula by a discerning mind, but that is not to say that there is a universal in which they equally partake. I know that kind of seems to be like what you're saying, Jake. Like, so we would want to say, we would want to say that we're actually recognizing something that is truly common. That, but we don't,
and that commonality is there, right?
Yeah,
the
commonality.
It's there whether you're noticing it or not.
Yeah,
right. You're not just applying a name that fits equally well, but there's something there in virtue of which the name fits equally well that you're noticing. Right.
Yeah, and it seems he wants to say that it's just this, that there's some sort of singularity between them, but that the mind grasps, but isn't actually shared between them. It's really, that's really weird.
So yeah, I think that, the confusion again, I think it really comes down to when you're using the term universal, right? Is there a universal in me? Yeah, there is, potentially, because there's a nature in me actually, and that nature can be abstracted from me and stripped of its individuality.
Yeah.
And whatever is left there is a universal reality. That thing that's left is universal, right?
Yeah.
But if it's the product of the abstraction, right? If it's the thing that's left after the mind has done the work of abstraction, then it is there, right? Right. And that it has to be that way. Otherwise, angels couldn't know, I don't think.
Yeah, that's
you know
gotta be,
what I mean?
That's got to be right. Once you understand, then the nature of, like, the intellect can only understand universals,
right?
Things abstracted from matter. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So we have an agent intellect which makes potentially intelligible things actually intelligible, right?
Yes.
But the agent intellect isn't adding anything of itself to the to the thing, right? To the reality that you're observing, right?
That's it. That's it.
But I think that's what Suarez is making a mistake, right?
And that's the thing is, what I don't understand is how do you make that mistake? you can't. I don't think you can say like so. The nominalist wants to, and even that Suarez isn't a nominalist in this sense, but I'll generalize that like all these things look the same to me, so I'm just going to call them the same thing. But what reason do I have to predicate the same thing of these similar looking things unless I can say that they're like, in order for me to call them in order for me to say that Jake is human, Peter's human, I actually have to recognize that there really is something common between you.
Okay, but
not just in my mind, right?
I think it's a to give some credit. St. Thomas does say you wouldn't really have universality without mind in Diente, right? I think he says.
Well, he says that's the thing. There's essence as it exists in an individual. There's essence as it exists in the mind, and then there's essence as it exists like abstracted, like in say.
Yeah.
Right.
Essence considered abstractly, yeah.
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 There's the existence it has in the thing, there's the existence it has in my mind, and then there's like the essence in itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Considered abstractly.
Right. But he makes the claim, right, that without mind you don't have universality, right? Because it's not in the individual.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that. Yeah.
And
universals do not subsist on their own. Yeah.
And it's not the essence considered abstractly isn't a universal thing either, right?
Well, is it not? What do you mean by universal?
He says it's neither individual nor universal, right? Because if it were individual, then there could only be one of the thing that you're talking about. And if there were many, then if they're universal, then there would have to, by definition, be many of the thing that you're talking about.
Yep.
Right. He says so you only have universality with mind, essence considered in the mind, right? So I mean, it's not the most you're not setting Olympic records of long jumping by saying, okay, well, maybe universality comes from the mind then. Right? Like maybe the mind produces universality. If you don't have universality without mind, well, maybe the mind produces the universality that only exists with the mind, right? But just because universality doesn't exist apart from the mind doesn't mean that universality only exists because of the mind.
Yeah, that's true. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mistake.
Yeah.